Derek Miles pedaled fast through the morning traffic, his heart racing. He was already running 10 minutes behind. Today was the big interview, the one job that could finally change his life. He had prepped for weeks, polished his resume, practiced in front of the mirror. But now, all of that hung by a thread. Please like and subscribe to my channel for more contents like this. As he neared the intersection, he spotted a woman standing helplessly by the side of the road. Her car had a flat tire, and she looked completely lost. Cars whizzed past her, no one stopping, everyone too busy to care. She glanced down at the tire, her hands trembling, then up at the speeding cars. Something in Derek pulled him back. He slowed down. He told himself to keep going, to focus on the interview. But his bike swerved almost on its own, and he skidded to a stop beside her. "Do you need help?" he asked, breathless. The woman turned sharply, her green eyes locking with his. She looked surprised, almost suspicious. But then her face softened. "Yeah, I think I do." Derek nodded and rolled up his sleeves. "Got a spare?" She pointed to the trunk. "Yeah, I'll grab it." As she walked around the car, he got to work loosening the bolts. The tire was jammed tight, but his fingers moved quickly, muscle memory from years of bike repairs guiding him. The woman paced beside him, muttering under her breath. "I'm gonna be late," she said, glancing at her watch. Derek chuckled lightly, sweat beading on his forehead. "Yeah, me too." She looked at him again, something shifting in her expression. "Wait, are you on your way to something important?" He shrugged. "Job interview." The moment Derek said, "job interview," her face fell. Her mouth opened slightly, and her eyes blinked with guilt. "Oh no," she whispered. Derek tightened the last bolt and stood up. He wiped his hands on his jeans, the weight of time hitting him like a truck. He looked down at his watch. 10 minutes late, and that was just to get there. He'd blown it. "It's fine," he said, quickly brushing it off. "It's not," she replied, stepping closer. "You helped me when you didn't have to. That counts for something." She reached into her handbag and pulled out a sleek card. "Call me," she said, placing it in his hand. He barely glanced at it, assuming it was a thank you gesture. "I don't need anything. Just call me," she repeated firmly. Then she climbed into her car and drove off. Derek stood frozen for a moment, staring at the road she'd disappeared down. He shook his head, tucked the card into his pocket, and pedaled off. Later that night, he checked his email. There it was, a rejection letter from the company he had interviewed for. "We appreciate your interest, but have decided to move forward with other candidates." His stomach sank. Another door closed. Another dream pushed out of reach. He sighed, tossing his phone on the bed. As he sat there, something shiny caught his eye from the nightstand. The business card. He picked it up. Jasmine Cole, CEO, Cole Industries. Derek's jaw dropped. Cole Industries? That was the same company that had just rejected him. His heart thudded. Was it possible? Without thinking, he grabbed his phone and dialed the number. On the second ring, she picked up. "You called," she said, her voice calm. Derek hesitated. "Yeah, Did you get the job?" Jasmine Cole asked over the phone, her tone calm but direct. Derek let out a tired, humorless chuckle. "No, missed the interview, completely." There was silence on the line. Then, in a tone that left no room for argument, she said, "Come to my office. Now." Derek blinked. "Wait, what?" But the call had already ended. He stared at the phone in disbelief. What just happened? He checked the card again. This had to be a mistake. Still, something told him not to ignore it. A couple of hours later, Derek stood in front of the towering Cole Industries building. It was all polished glass and chrome, glowing in the sun like a beacon of power. He stepped into the luxurious lobby, his scuffed shoes squeaking against the marble floor. The receptionist looked up. "Mr. Cole is expecting you," she said, barely glancing at him. "Mr. Cole?" Confused, He stepped into the elevator and pressed the top floor. When the door slid open, he walked into a sleek, modern office. Jasmine stood by the window, arms crossed. She turned as he entered. "You came." "Still not sure why," Derek muttered. "Sit," she said, motioning to the chair across from her desk. He sat down slowly, his hands still dirty from the morning. She studied him for a long moment before speaking. "You saved me yesterday." "You didn't have to, but you did." He shrugged. "It was just a tire." "No," she said sharply. "It wasn't. It was my entire day, my career, and you didn't ask for anything." She paused. "I owe you." Derek shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not looking for favors." Jasmine leaned forward. "Good. Because this isn't a favor. I have a job opening. You're going to take it." Derek blinked. "Wait, are you serious?" Jasmine gave him a small smirk. "I don't joke about business." She slid a manila folder across the desk. Derek opened it and his eyes widened. A contract. A real job offer. Full-time. High salary. Benefits. Everything he'd been chasing. "But I didn't even interview," he said. "You did," Jasmine replied. "Yesterday. When you chose someone else's problem over your own future." Derek looked down at the contract again, his hands trembling slightly. The offer was better than anything he had dared to dream about. Still, something held him back. "Why would you give this to me?" Jasmine leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs. "Because I built this company from the ground up. I know what it means to make hard choices. I saw something in you." "What?" Derek asked, honestly confused. "The same fire I had when I started." He hesitated. "I don't want pity." Her voice was sharp. "This isn't pity, Derek. This is a test. You've already passed the first one." He looked down again, the pen heavy in his hand. This was his chance. A second one. Maybe his only one. Slowly he reached forward and signed his name. Jasmine nodded once. "Welcome to Coal Industries." Derek left the office in a daze, his head spinning. He had come here expecting nothing, maybe a thank you. Now he had a job. A real job. Everything felt unreal. He wasn't sure why Jasmine had chosen him, but he was determined to prove that she hadn't made a mistake. The next morning, Derek walked into Coal Industries, not as a visitor, but as an employee. Everything about the building screamed power. Polished floors, glass walls, the scent of fresh coffee and expensive cologne. He felt like an outsider, dressed in a clean shirt and the same old shoes. His nerves twisted inside him. He didn't belong here. "Mr. Miles," a crisp voice called. He turned to see a woman in a sleek black suit holding a folder. "I'm Leah, Miss Cole's assistant. Follow me." Derek nodded and trailed behind her through the maze of hallways and executive offices. She stopped in front of a glass door and pushed it open. "Your workspace." Derek stepped in, expecting a cubicle, but what he found was a private office, large windows, a leather chair, a new laptop already waiting on the desk. "There's been a mistake," he said quickly, turning to Leah. "I think this is no mistake," she said. "Miss Cole arranged it herself." Then she handed him a folder. "Your responsibilities. You start immediately." She walked away without another word. Derek stood there, stunned. Why was she doing this? Why him? He opened the folder and stared at the pages. Financials, strategies, reports. This wasn't just an assistant gig. This was real work. High-level work. He sat down slowly, heart pounding. What if he failed? What if they found out he wasn't good enough? Whispers started that afternoon. People stared, judged. He could feel it. Who is he? Why does he have an office? He's nobody. Derek clenched his jaw. He would prove them all wrong. He had to. Just 3 days into the job, Derek was summoned to Jasmine's office again. She didn't waste time. She handed him a thick file and spoke without emotion. I need you to prepare a presentation for the executive board. Financial summary. Friday morning. Derek stared at the file like it might bite him. That's in 2 days. Yes, Jasmine said, her tone sharp. And they'll expect you to know every number. But I don't, he trailed off. Her eyes narrowed. You don't what? He swallowed. I don't have corporate experience. I've never done anything like this. Jasmine didn't blink. You can learn. You will. Her tone left no room for argument. Derek nodded, gripping the file with sweating palms. He spent the next 2 nights at his desk, barely sleeping, poring over every report and figure. He watched videos on financial modeling, read late into the night, and made dozens of revisions. By the time Friday came, he looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He walked into the boardroom, his knees shaking, and faced a row of executives with cold, calculating eyes. Jasmine sat silently at the head of the table. Derek began to speak. His voice trembled at first, but he pushed through, using everything he had learned in 48 frantic hours. He explained the numbers, answered questions, even cracked a small joke. Silence followed his final slide. Then one of the older executives leaned back in his chair and nodded. Not bad. That was it. But it was enough. Derek exhaled, shoulders dropping with relief. He had survived the first storm. Later that evening, Jasmine called Derek into her office again. He walked in expecting feedback or criticism. Instead, she sat quietly, studying him. Why didn't you just take the card and walk away that day? She asked. Derek blinked. I thought it was just a thank you. Most people would have used it for a favor. Asked for money. You didn't, she said. You looked at me like I was just a person, not a CEO. He shrugged. Because that's what you were. A person who needed help. Jasmine leaned forward, her expression unreadable. Do you know why I hired you? No, he said honestly. Because you reminded me of myself, she said quietly. Derek's heart skipped. She stood and walked to the window. I started this company from nothing. I know what it's like to feel like an outsider. She turned, her green eyes fierce. You want to prove yourself? Then do it. A challenge. A promise. Derek nodded. I will. Jasmine gave the smallest smile. Good. Because I won't go easy on you. From that moment, Derek understood this wasn't just a job. This was a test. One he had to pass no matter what. The days that followed were a blur of stress and pressure. Derek barely had time to breathe. Every task was urgent. Every deadline was tight. Coal Industries wasn't just fast-paced, it was brutal. And Jasmine? She showed him no favoritism. In fact, she was harder on him than anyone else. Your numbers are weak, she said one morning, tossing his latest report onto the table. Do better. Derek bit the inside of his cheek. I'll fix it. You'll fix it by tomorrow, she replied. Tomorrow? He nodded, hiding the panic in his chest. Okay. That night, Derek didn't go home. He stayed in his office with nothing but coffee and spreadsheets. He rechecked every figure, redid every chart. When the sun rose the next morning, his eyes were bloodshot and his hands ached. He slid the updated report onto Jasmine's desk without a word. She skimmed it, nodded once, and handed it back. Better. No smile. No praise. But somehow, that one word meant more than 100 compliments. Still, he wasn't ready for what came next. One afternoon, Derek walked into a scheduled meeting only to find the presentation slides he had prepared completely altered. Key data was missing. Some of it was flat out wrong. The executives looked furious. What is this? One snapped. Derek froze. His throat closed up. He hadn't made these changes. Jasmine sat at the far end of the table, silent, her face unreadable. This wasn't the version I submitted, Derek said, his voice tight. The damage was already done. That afternoon, Jasmine called him into her office. You let your guard down, she said sharply. I didn't think. No, she cut in. You didn't. Her words stung. Fix it, she said coldly. or don't come back. Derek walked out of her office feeling like his chest had been cracked open. Fix it. 2 words, and yet they meant everything. No sympathy. No second chances. He got to work. For the next week, Derek barely slept. He reviewed every document, every file, every internal login. He started digging. Whoever had sabotaged him had left traces, and Derek followed them. Piece by piece, he uncovered the trail, login timestamps, edited files, internal emails. Finally, he found it. The culprit was a junior analyst from another department, bitter, competitive, and careless. Derek compiled everything and took it straight to the board. The fallout was swift. The analyst was fired. Just like that, the whispers stopped. People no longer looked at him like a mistake. They looked at him like a problem, one they couldn't get rid of easily. Even Jasmine seemed different after that. She didn't praise him, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of respect, maybe. It was enough. Then one evening, Jasmine did something completely unexpected. She invited him to a charity gala. Derek stared at her in shock. I don't exactly own a tux. You do now, she said. The next morning, a perfectly tailored black suit was delivered to his office. Still in its plastic cover. He touched it carefully like it might vanish. That night, under the soft lights of the gala, Derek stepped into a world he had never known. Wealth, power, elegance. Jasmine moved through the crowd like a queen, confident and poised. She didn't ignore him. She introduced him. This is Derek Miles, she said. He works closely with me. For the first time, people looked at him like he mattered, like he belonged. But then the night shifted and the past came knocking. It started with a man in a dark suit, holding a champagne glass like a weapon. He approached Jasmine, his eyes sharp with hostility. You made a mistake, Cole, he said, loud enough for others to hear. The room tensed. Jasmine's jaw tightened. I don't make mistakes. The man's smirk deepened. We'll see about that. He turned and disappeared into the crowd, leaving silence in his wake. Derek moved closer. Who was that? Jasmine exhaled slowly. An old enemy. Something in her voice said this wasn't over. She didn't say more. But 2 days later, the threat arrived. A legal notice. A lawsuit. Accusations against Cole Industries. Jasmine read it quietly. Her expression didn't change. They're trying to scare me, she said flatly. Derek frowned. Is it working? She looked up, eyes hard. No, but he wasn't sure that was true. The lawsuit triggered a storm. Meetings became daily war rooms. Jasmine fought back hard, counterclaims, evidence files, strategic responses. She didn't sleep much. Her fire never dimmed, but Derek saw it, the cost behind the fire. One night, long after everyone had gone, Derek found her alone in her office. The lights were low. Her head rested in her hands. He stepped inside quietly. Do you need help? Jasmine looked up, startled. For a moment, Derek thought she'd shut him out again. But she didn't. She nodded, just once, her eyes tired. For the first time, Jasmine Cole let someone else carry part of the weight. The next few weeks were tense. The lawsuit against Cole Industries made headlines. Investors panicked. The media circled like vultures. Inside the office, everyone moved in hushed tones, avoiding Jasmine's gaze. But Derek stayed close. He sat in on meetings, took notes, coordinated responses. Jasmine never asked him to, he just did. He saw her strength, but he also saw her cracks. Some nights she barely spoke. She'd stare at a wall or out the window, lost in thought. Derek started bringing her coffee without asking. Sometimes she nodded. Sometimes she didn't. But she always drank it. Then, just when things seemed darkest, Jasmine called an emergency board meeting. She walked in holding a thick file, her face calm, her heels sharp against the floor. Let me make this clear, she said, placing the file on the table. We have proof. The room fell silent. Inside the file was evidence of fraud, emails, documents, false claims. Not by her, but by the very group suing her. They thought they could bury me, Jasmine said, her voice low and steady. But I brought a shovel. The case crumbled overnight. By the next morning, news had shifted. Headlines now praised her strength, her intelligence, her victory. Coal Industries had survived, but Derek knew she had scars. Deep ones. That night, she called him into her office. He expected a breakdown of numbers or a new report to write. Instead, she simply said, "You did well." Derek blinked. "I didn't do much." "You did more than you think." Then she leaned forward. "What do you want, Derek?" The question hit hard. What did he want? For years, he'd only wanted to survive. But now, maybe he wanted something more. That question stayed in Derek's head for days. What do you want? He wasn't sure how to answer it. Jasmine didn't press. She just let the silence stretch between them like a rope waiting to be pulled. But the office had changed. People stopped questioning why Derek had an office. They came to him now, for help, for answers, for approval. His opinion suddenly mattered. And Jasmine? She relied on him more than ever. He stood beside her during meetings, joined her on business trips, handled confidential matters. She didn't explain why. She just handed him responsibilities, and he rose to meet them. The whispers in the office returned, but they sounded different now. He's her right hand. Have you noticed how close they are? I heard he started as some guy off the street. Derek heard it all and kept working. He didn't care about gossip, except maybe he did. One night, after a long day of travel, he and Jasmine sat across from each other in a quiet hotel lounge. The air was soft, the music low. "You're not the same man who walked into my office that day," Jasmine said suddenly. Derek looked up. "Neither are you." Their eyes met. Something passed between them. Something quiet, but undeniable. But neither of them said it out loud. Not yet. One weekend, Derek found himself outside a familiar building, the place where his original job interview had been scheduled months ago. He stood there for a long time, staring at the glass doors. He remembered how he'd felt that day. Rushed, nervous, desperate. He'd been willing to take anything, settle for any role, just to get his foot in the door. He had never made it inside. Now, looking through the glass, he realized something powerful. He didn't need that job anymore. He had gotten something better. He turned away and walked down the street, his steps sure, his shoulders high. A few days later, Jasmine called him into her office again. But this time, she looked different, softer. Her hair was pulled back loosely, and she wore no makeup. She looked tired, but also at peace. I was going to quit, she said suddenly. Derek froze. What? Before that day, the day you stopped to help me, I was done. Burn out. I was thinking about selling the company. He didn't know what to say. But then you showed up, she continued. A stranger. No agenda. Just kindness. And it reminded me why I started in the first place. She met his eyes. You gave me a reason to fight again. One crisp morning, Jasmine invited Derek to a quiet rooftop brunch. Just the two of them. No assistants. No board members. No files. He looked out at the skyline, sipping his coffee. Feels weird not holding a laptop. She laughed softly. I figured you earned a break. They sat in silence for a while, just watching the city breathe beneath them. I never thanked you properly, she said. Derek smiled. You gave me a job. That counts. She shook her head. I mean, really thanked you. Not with contracts or promotions. He tilted his head. Then how? She looked at him, her expression unreadable. By letting you in. That stopped him. She had always kept her walls up, always controlled the room. Now she was letting him see her, really see her. I thought being strong meant doing everything alone, she admitted. But sometimes real strength is letting someone stay. Derek's voice dropped. Then I'm not going anywhere. Jasmine nodded, her eyes glassy. The sun rose a little higher behind her. And for the first time since they met, she looked at peace. Months passed. Derek's role continued to grow. He was now part of every major decision. His name carried weight. But more importantly, so did his presence in Jasmine's life. They worked well together, not just as colleagues, but as something more. Something unspoken, but deeply understood. He had become the person she leaned on, and she had become his compass. One night, after a long meeting, Jasmine pulled Derek aside. "I have a question," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "Another task?" "No," she said quietly. "A personal one." She took a breath. "Do you ever regret helping me that day?" He smiled, stepping closer. "It wasn't even a question for me. The moment I saw you, I just knew." She looked up at him. "Knew what?" "That my life was about to change." She didn't reply. She just reached for his hand. No more walls. No more power games. Just two people who had found each other in the middle of chaos. And from that moment, everything changed. Derek stood at the edge of the rooftop one evening, watching the city shimmer beneath the stars. He thought about the man he used to be, the one who rushed through traffic on a rusty bike, desperately chasing a future that felt just out of reach. The one who stopped for a woman with a flat tire, thinking he had just thrown away his only chance at a better life. But that moment, that choice had rewritten everything. Behind him, the rooftop door opened. Jasmine stepped out, holding 2 mugs of tea. She joined him at the railing without a word, offering him one. "You always come up here when you're thinking," she said. "Old habit now," he replied, taking a sip. They stood in silence, watching the lights flicker below them. "I used to be afraid of heights," Jasmine said suddenly. Derek looked at her in surprise. "Seriously?" She nodded. "When I first bought this building, I couldn't even come up here without getting dizzy. And now?" She smiled faintly. "Now I like the view, but only because you're here." Derek's chest tightened. "You changed everything, you know," she added. "Not just the company. Me." He looked at her, steady. "You changed me too, Jasmine." For once, neither of them needed to say anything more, because the truth was already written in the space between them. And it was more than business, more than timing. It was connection, trust, a second chance for both of them. A year later, Coal Industries threw a grand anniversary celebration, not for the company's founding, but for the day the lawsuit was dismissed. They called it Resilience Day. Executives in designer suits raised champagne glasses. Clients gave speeches. There was music, lights, laughter. But Derek kept to the side, watching the crowd. He still felt a little out of place sometimes, even after everything. He wasn't born into this world of power and polish. But Jasmine made sure he never felt left behind. She found him by the tall windows and slid her hand into his. "Do you remember what you were doing this time last year?" she asked. He smirked. "Crying over a rejection email, I think." "And fixing my tire," she added. He chuckled. "Best bad decision I ever made." "You mean best right decision?" Their eyes met. In the middle of the room, filled with success and spectacle, they stood like something solid, like the foundation beneath it all. And when Jasmine stepped onto the stage to give her speech, she didn't talk about profits or growth charts. She talked about chances and choices. "Sometimes," she said, "the right people show up when we least expect them, not because they're the most qualified, but because they show heart. That's what built this company, and that's what saved it." Then she looked at Derek and smiled. That night, after the event, Derek and Jasmine walked through the quiet halls of Coal Industries. Everyone else had gone home. The building felt peaceful, almost sacred. They stopped in front of the elevator, not ready to leave just yet. Jasmine leaned against the wall, looking up at him. "You know," she said, "I never believed in fate." Derek tilted his head. "And now?" She gave him a half smile. "Now I think maybe fate believed in me." He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You never needed fate," he said softly. You just needed someone to remind you how powerful you already were. She didn't say anything. Instead, she leaned forward and rested her forehead against his. No kiss, no dramatic declarations, just a quiet closeness that said everything. They had built trust, respect, something real. And whether it became love or stayed something undefined, they both knew it was rare and worth holding on to. The next morning, Derek arrived at the office early. He stood at the front steps of Coal Industries, sunlight warming the glass. This time he wasn't nervous. He wasn't a desperate man trying to prove himself. He was a man who had already proven everything. The security guard at the entrance nodded respectfully. "Good morning, Mr. Miles." Derek smiled. "Morning." He walked through the lobby, past the elevators, past the polished floors that had once made him feel so small. And when he reached his office, the one Jasmine had insisted he deserved, he sat down and opened his laptop with calm confidence. A knock came at the door. Jasmine leaned in, holding 2 coffees. "Still like it black with 2 sugars?" she asked. "You remember?" "I remember everything." They shared a quiet smile. Then she set the coffee down and left without another word. But Derek didn't need her to say anything, because he already knew. The moment he chose kindness over ambition, everything changed. And now, standing in the life he never thought he'd have, he understood one thing clearly. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning.